and I cannot see anything, anyone's faces, or even myself clearly from a foot away. I didn't get contacts until a week before my freshman year of high school. I'm 19 now. Because I was always too embarrassed to admit to my parents and peers that I was legitimately blind. I outsmarted every single eye test I ever took throughout school. I can remember doing this as early as first grade. Because I was with poor vision since I was a baby, I got extremely good at living and operating in this blurry perception of reality. So much so that no one could really tell at all. People knew I had bad vision, or a hard time seeing the board, but no one was aware to what extent. My realization was that because I was practically blind from such an early age, I have no perception of myself. As toddlers and as you grow in age, you gain a perception of what you look like, and in sense who you are. But because of my eyesight I was never able to tell what I truly looked like. Like I mentioned, I couldn't even see myself clearly in a mirror. This is detrimental for pivotal developmental years, especially a young girl trying to make it in social settings, and trying to gain confidence through her sense of self. Think about it. My only perception of what I looked like was what other people would tell me. I was bullied throughout elementary and middle school, and was convinced from an early age that I was ugly, awkward, weird, etc. But the truth is I was just a blind girl trying to operate with a body face I had no recognition of. When I put my contacts in for the first time at 15 years old and looked in the mirror, that was the first time my brain ever truly recognized my face. I was completely disassociated from who I was. At this point I had absolutely no confidence, or any idea how to function as a normal teenager. I had never even seen leaves on a tree, or clouds in the sky, other than in pictures. My life had been flipped upside down. It was the first time I could ever see a face, and properly socialize with other people. High school was extremely difficult. I floated around with a few childhood friends, with a hint of awkward I don't think will ever leave, and I went relatively unnoticed to the 400 people in my class. I was even bullied and convinced I was uglier than all the girls who were mean to me. When I got to college I was astonished of how much attention I received for my appearance. No one could understand why I was so insecure, and I had just figured that I must have had some drastic glow up. But then the other day I connected the pieces together. That may seem obvious. I have always looked like this my whole life, but I have no recollection of it because as a little girl until 15 I couldn't see it for myself. Every time I got called beautiful as a child, they were being honest. Here are some results of being blind for so long. I have developmental prosopagnosia or face blindness. My brain never developed facial recognition, and now I can't distinguish faces, or remember faces even if I see a familiar person walking down the street. If the person is out of context, I will have no idea who they are. I never learned to judge people on the basis of appearance. Every judgment I've made of people growing up was on how they treated me and others, because that's all I could ever see. Actions over what someone looks like. I think it's also because of this that I don't find myself subconsciously surrounding myself with attractive people. I'm completely disassociated with any pictures taken of me up until 15. It doesn't feel like it is even me. Even now I find it difficult to recognize myself in pictures, and every picture of my face looks weirdly different. I was diagnosed with ADD last year. Despite never showing symptoms as a kid, I was in my head and imaginary world so much as a child because the world around me wasn't as interesting. I couldn't focus on the things occurring around me. Now I struggle with concentrating on everything. School, conversations, movies, everything. Edit. Thank you for the replies that have corrected me in my terminology. I am not technically legally blind because my vision can be corrected with lenses. However, my point was that because I neglected correcting my vision for so long, I lived as if I were legally blind until I was 15. How did you fake eye tests? How did you overcome difficulties in school due to not being able to see? It was the test I think we've all taken, where you look into the box and it's an image of a little house on a farm maybe, and they show various images with different lenses. What's the picture of? I knew it was a little house. Is it clearer now or before? I knew that I had to say the image was clearer before adding the lenses. I was a sneaky kid to say the least. They caught me in middle school and called me down to the main office, and by then the tests were a bit more difficult. They gave me a note to take home. but for some reason I decided to withhold it from my parents. I like to think I'm pretty intelligent, and I always had to work extra to get by. Like I had a huge secret. Elementary school was less board work and more hands-on, so I made it by. Middle school was when it got difficult because the nature of classroom and learning had changed. I got by through natural intelligence. I would ace the tests but hated the educational system. I wouldn't do homework. I would act out in school. Was sort of a class clown. No one saw my true potential in school. No one thought I was intelligent. The vision setback made my intelligence seem very average to teachers and peers. I think this is why I was diagnosed with ADD last year. I was so in my head all the time as a kid because the world around me was blurry. Now I have trouble concentrating. When you look in the mirror now, do you see yourself as pretty? Also, you said you can't recognize somebody with their face alone, but do you find other people's appearance attractive at all? Or is it like looking at a blank slate? It's actually kind of sad. No, when I look in the mirror I don't see myself as pretty. I can't recognize really my own face. Like I've had this same face my whole life, and in high school when I'd look in the mirror I was just absolutely convinced I was the most hideous girl in the world. I don't believe that now because the extent of the compliments I receive, attention I receive. But when I look in the mirror it's still kind of like I don't understand my attractiveness. And yes, I do find other people attractive. Since I was a little girl I always had celebrity crushes or boys in school that I liked. If I'm looking at someone directly in person, I can distinguish if I'm attracted to them or if they have an attractive face. But it's remembering the face as a whole when I'm not looking at them that is extremely difficult. What was it like to watch something about nature first time? Let my dumbass explain better. Like it had to be crazy to see a tree or a lake or something for the first time. I feel like that's something we all take for granted. Oh, absolutely unreal. You know how when you're a kid and you draw a tree with like a trunk and then a green bush at the top? That's how trees legitimately always look to me. So I went for a walk outside and it was incredible. The leaves, each and every one of them. The world was so much more interesting and complex than I ever imagined. As someone with -6.50 in one eye and -7.00 in the other, I have no idea how you faked it for so long. I literally would not be able to leave my house without my glasses on and would almost definitely injure myself badly if I tried to go anywhere. I panic if my glasses drop off my bedside table in the night as I can't even see them on the floor beside the bed. Ever since I began wearing glasses and contacts my eyesight has gotten worse. When I was tested at 15 it was -5.50, which I guess isn't that much better. I always wonder how I did it for so long. Every time I take my contacts out to sleep, I can't even comprehend living in that kind of world. But I did. I mean, as a child life's a little easier. I could see enough to not run into things, to play on a playground, to walk in a single file line, etc. Why did you fake the eye tests? Didn't you want to be able to see? I don't know how nobody noticed. This is a good question, and I often struggle with myself over it. I'm mad at myself. I guess since humans are born with bad eyesight, ever since I was a baby I've had this vision, and I think I was just used to it. As a small child you don't know any better. You just assume that everyone sees the same way you do. When I realized I couldn't see like everyone else, I started to realize how bad it was. I was embarrassed. I didn't want glasses. This is what I knew. It also doesn't help, but I grew up in an extremely dysfunctional family. Financially well off, but dysfunctional in so many ways. My parents didn't notice, and I didn't feel close enough to tell them without being embarrassed. I guess I don't really have a good excuse looking back, but that was my reason as a child. How do you approach eye contact now that you are able to see clearly? Extremely difficult for me. I'm getting better at it now, but it's hard to maintain it. I think about how I must have looked when I was younger trying to communicate. Everyone always would call me shy, especially my parents, and I would get so angry because I'm actually extroverted, but had no way to express myself or interact properly. Do you not even recognize your parents' or relatives' faces? This is hard to explain, but I'll try my best. So let's say my parents put on costumes with wigs and I happen to walk past them on a random street completely out of context. I would never recognize them. Obviously this has never happened. I could describe them to someone in somewhat full detail though. by other factors like hair color, body, height, voice, eyes, etc. It's very frustrating though. For instance, I only have 2 cousins who I've been seeing a few times a year my entire life. Last summer I went to a pizza place and had completely forgotten my mom had told me my one cousin worked there. I waited in line, didn't recognize him, even ordered, and didn't recognize him standing 5 feet away from his co-worker. Then he says my name, and I look at him with pure confusion. I couldn't recognize him at all. I couldn't recognize my own cousin. So, which do you like better? The world where you were blind, but adjusted? Or this new world where you can see, but everything has become awkward and alien? Oh, Ro, this is so interesting. Your post made me realize that I was blind for a big chunk of my life too. Our stories are actually very similar. I too somehow managed to get through life without wearing contacts until I was 10 I believe. I would do okay in school and stuff. I cannot really imagine how I would use public transportation correctly without even seeing the bus numbers properly. My eyesight is even worse than yours. By the way, it's around -12. Same thing as in your case. People knew I had a bad eyesight, but they never knew just how bad it was. Some things I've noticed. I too have an ability to recognize and remember faces. It's not severe enough to make my life difficult, but it's sure as hell weird for me how people in general can immediately recognize someone after they've shaved their beard. For example, I always recognize people because of their most prominent features. I used to have the worst body dysmorphia as a teen. I never thought about it, but it might be related. I also pay little attention to people's appearance. I mean, I have my likes and dislikes. But in general, as soon as I get to know a person, I truly sometimes can't tell how beautiful they are according to the conventional standards. Wow, -12? That must have been so difficult I can't even imagine. I think you could agree that once you're adjusted, you can hide the extent of your blindness to those around you. People are in disbelief that I was able to hide it. I too recognize people by prominent features. And I would definitely say that at least my body dysmorphia is a result of not having a correct perception of myself because of my terrible eyesight. Have you overcome this about yourself? When you think back to being a child, do you feel somewhat disassociated? It's crazy to me because I've never thought about any of this before. Like all my childhood, and my old blind perception has been suppressed in my mind. I'm glad to hear about someone who can relate. How old are you? It's beautiful you don't judge people based on looks. Honestly, I bet you're such a genuine person. People are too superficial, but you aren't. Thank you. I really appreciate this. I didn't even realize it until I got to college. When I was younger, I never understood how people could be so awful, so boring, so mean, yet everyone seemed so infatuated with them. It's really sad looking back at it, but I couldn't be more grateful for my perspective. What do you think is the cutest animal? How did you react to seeing friends and family for the first time? Probably dogs. Or I used to really like lions. It was really weird when I saw friends and family for the first time, because over the years my brain had created what they looked like in my head based on pictures and close interactions. But I had never seen it in person. I suppressed a lot of stuff and was very hidden person. So when I got contacts, no one even realized how life-changing it was. Not my family or even my closest friends. I played it off like, oh yeah, I got contacts, and continued to live normally. It's strange though, because even now I can't recognize my family's faces. Have you been to the beach or saw the ocean in general? If so, how was it? I have. It's weird because I would go on vacations as a kid to the beach, and I always thought it was so beautiful. But now looking back, I realize I didn't have the slightest clue to the extent of that beauty. Now when I go on vacation, it's completely breathtaking. So many things I didn't experience properly. The sand, waves, where the sky meets the ocean, clouds, everything. Breathtaking. Did you not have to take eye tests where there are a bunch of letters on a line that get smaller and smaller? Nope, never. They never had that at school. Just at the eye doctor, which I never went to. I guess we're kind of the opposite in that my vision isn't really be corrected, since it's a combination of not only vanilla stuff like refractive error and astigmatisms, but also nystagmus, optic nerve misrouting and macula. The macula is responsible for detail vision, hyperplasia, and as a kid I grew up forced to over-rely on my vision. I'm legally blind, as even with glasses my vision is 20/200 and I actually use a white cane and stuff, but I feel like an imposter because I rely on my vision a lot, but I'm not quite sighted either. I didn't get glasses until I was 6 or so, as they couldn't really aid my vision without causing headaches. I don't have depth perception. My vision varies quite a bit since my eyes involuntarily shake and they're very sensitive to light because I have albinism. My eyes don't work together, so my brain only pays attention to one eye at a time, and they also can't really focus. I could go on and on about all the ways my eyes are little shits, but I guess what I'm really curious is why you kept faking the eye tests if you knew you couldn't see. Wow, thank you for sharing. I too have an astigmatism, but I can't imagine what it must be like for you. I sympathize with you because although I eventually corrected my vision, I lived many years in your shoes, and I understand the disability not being able to see causes, and how hard it is, especially as a kid trying to fit in your know. I just looked up my uncorrected vision to be around 20/500 or maybe worse. I kept faking it because I was embarrassed and a very suppressed child. I don't have good relationship with my parents and didn't feel comfortable talking to them about it. Worst of all, they didn't even really notice it. A lot was going on around me at home, and I think I used not being able to see as a coping mechanism to avoid the severity of things around me. It's just unfortunate and sad, and I regret it a lot. There is something that I still don't understand, although you might have answered it in one of the questions. I have like -4 in both eyes, and I knew that I had bad vision when I would compare myself to, for example, other kids. I would see an object up close but not far away, unlike the other kids. So did you just feel it wasn't a problem, or what exactly? I can't imagine myself without glasses contacts because not wearing one can drive me crazy. Oh, I definitely knew it was a problem. At first when I was really young, I didn't really realize that my eyes were bad. I just was so used to living like that and had thought everyone saw the way I did. But like you said, I started to realize through comparison that I couldn't see like everyone else. I mean by then, though, I had been doing it for so long that I found ways around everything. I was living normally and became very good at hiding it. I didn't realize how annoying it was to not see, because I had never seen clearly, and I was mostly just too embarrassed to talk to anyone about it, especially my parents. When you dreamed or was in your imagination, did things look right or was it distorted? My mom had the same kind of thing, except only till 1st grade, so she didn't have as many issues. She always said she thought leaves were one big mass and corners were rounded. But when I ask her about the dreams and imagination, she can't remember. I am just very curious. Thanks. Hi, good question. It's really hard to remember that kind of stuff. But when I was a kid, there were a few things that I loved, and I realize why now. I was a huge film buff, and I would spend hours playing video games. I think my perception of things was correct in my brain because I could see in movies what life was supposed to look like. Same with video games. I can't really remember how my dreams were. I was able to fake it until I was 8.5. I always put myself at the end of reading circles so that by the time it was my turn I had memorized the book. Then I started daydreaming and lost my place. Busted. Haha, I can relate. I used to do the whole memorizing thing as well, especially for presentations in front of the class and stuff like that. It was always so much anxiety trying to hide it. This sounds like bullshit tbh. I'm short-sighted enough that I can only read this post with my phone 2 inches from my face. It's noticeable that you can't see, unless you have the most negligent family and teachers ever. Edit. I've had glasses since toddlerhood too, and my eyesight is much worse than yours. -11.5, -14, and I'm not legally blind. Believe whatever you want. I have absolutely no reason to lie about this. I did have extremely negligent family, and my childhood was very dysfunctional. I can only read a screen from an inch or 2 away as well. But when you've lived like that your whole life with the mission to hide it, you'd be surprised how unnoticed it can go. In middle school everyone knew my eyesight was shit, but not to the extent. It got to a point where everyone, my teachers, friends, peers, etc., knew. but my parents had no clue and didn't care enough to get it fixed, because if I didn't complain to them about it, they just assumed that I was fine. It's sad more than anything. Also, I'm pretty sure I lied to my teachers telling them that I had glasses but never wear them, so they wouldn't try to reach out to my parents. Do you recognize people's voices? Like, do you know who the person is based on what their voice sounds like? Do people get offended when you don't recognize them? I do recognize people's voices. I will almost always recognize someone if it's in the correct context. Like if I go to a get together with relatives or friends, I can distinguish people by their characteristics, like hair, height, eye shape, color, clothing, body shape, etc. Often people can't tell I have this problem at all. They just think I have bad memory, or I'll figure out who it is relatively quickly. I have had people get offended that I don't recognize them, especially in college, because there's so many people that you meet briefly in class or social settings. Then you'll run into them outside of that context. This has happened multiple times. I just look at them confused like, have I met you before? People then get the assumption that I don't care about them, or I'm a beach, or cold. When you look at full body pictures of, for example, family members or friends, do you recognize people by their body shape, etc.? Or do you ask who is who? Also, what do you think is the best thing about seeing clearly? Someone I know from class said the best thing is seeing leaves on trees clearly, and I personally think it's seeing landscapes clearly. I would be able to recognize them, no doubt, but if it was a cropped picture without hair and body, just the face, I would have an extremely hard time distinguishing who's who. It's funny, I would also agree with the trees. I don't know what it is, but being able to see each and every leaf was incredible to me. But yes, landscapes in general, the whole picture, honestly any landscape. What if you were asked, for example, to solve a math question on the board? What did you do if you didn't see it? This probably started happening around 4th grade into middle school. Thankfully, I've always been very good at math and schoolwork. So if I got asked to go up to the board, I would walk up and look at the problem from a foot away, then solve. There was ways around almost everything. My eyes are -5ish and my mind is blown that you managed for that long. It's amazing how the mind can adapt to something like that. I cannot function without my glasses or contacts, and the few times that I've tried were extremely disorienting. Was it overwhelming when you first got your contacts? Did you have to take breaks? How long did it take for your brain to mostly adjust to the new normal? What's your favorite thing that you're able to see now that you weren't able to before? It was incredibly overwhelming. I would get headaches a lot when I first started wearing contacts. My brain was overwhelmed with all the little details of life. I remember I went to the eye doctor inside of a Walmart and they gave me sample contacts to take home after I got tested. I put them in and was completely astonished by Walmart. I could see every single person walking by, what each sign said, all the colors. It was absolutely crazy to me. My favorite thing that I could finally see was people and landscapes, like the specific details of someone's face. I remember looking at my mom in Walmart and like finally connecting the dots to what she actually looked like. The wrinkles in her face, everything. -6 is legally blind? Damn, I'm getting there. And it already feels like hell when I'm not wearing any contacts or glasses. -450. I was corrected in the replies. You're only considered legally blind if your vision is worse than 20/200 even with corrected lenses. My vision is like 20/500 or something without my glasses or contacts. So I guess I was living blind simply because I didn't go to the eye doctor.